Good morning, colleagues. We will begin our meeting. We do have quorum now, so if everybody could probably take their seats, and we will get started. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to technically our first meeting of the Standing Committee on Procedures and House Affairs. I want to wish to remind members that the Chair met informally on Monday with Monsieur Prou, Monsieur Guimont, Monsieur Godin, Mr. Lukiski, and myself, just informally. We did have a brief conversation about the way the committee would proceed. I want to also tell members this morning that this meeting is in this particular room at the request of some members. The meeting is being held in public with the ability to be televised. We are being televised. In fact, we are being televised, as the clerk reminds me. I'm suggesting that what we do first here this morning is start with our routine motions. That is the typical way for a meeting to start up. You have in front of you the generic motions that we tend to adopt. I'm asking members to read through them as well. The clerk has provided members with a copy of last year, what this committee adopted last year, so you can refer to both. And then I will be looking for a mover of each motion. If colleagues could be just kind enough to move each motion, read the motion into the record, and then give me the opportunity to ask members to accept the motion. We'll move to the next one. And then following that, we will proceed with our work and planning our work. Is that acceptable to members that we proceed in that fashion? All agreed. Thank you. I will then therefore go to the paper that is headed up Routine Motions Opening of a Session, and I'm looking for a motioner. Monsieur Prou, I'm accepting your motion for the first one, if you'd be kind enough to read it into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the services of analysts from the Library of Parliament that the committee retain as needed, and at the discretion of the chair, the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist it in its work. That's good.
All in favor of that motion, please raise your hands. Anybody opposed? I will invite Michelle to the table. Congratulations. It's an honor to have you again this year. Can I have a mover, please, for the second routine motion? Thank you. Monsieur Leblanc.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would then move que le sous-comité du programme et de la
that the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure be established and be composed of the chair, the two vice chairs, and a member of the other opposition party. Thank you.
Any opposed? So carried. Thank you. May I have a mover for the next routine motion? Monsieur Guimont.
Just before that, Mr. Chairman, I'm comparing the two with what the clerk has provided us with, the minutes of the April 6, 2006 meeting, where the same motions more or less were agreed to. And I see, before coming to the reduced quorum, we looked at this motion earlier this week when we formed or set up the committee, and I'd like to know if we have to adopt a formal motion. It's the whole issue of the selection of the members for each of the 26 committees of the House of Commons, and so I don't see that anywhere. I can read it if you wish. Is that still relevant and useful?
We did agree to that motion at the end of the last meeting, but we can read it into the record and then agree just for procedural correctness. So, Monsieur Guimont, if you
that the four whips be delegated the authority to act as the striking committee pursuant to Standing Orders 104, 113, and 114, and that they be authorized to present directly to the chair in a report signed by all four whips or the representatives their unanimous recommendations for presentation to the House on behalf of the committee.
Nobody opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Monsieur Guimont. Going back to the routine motions, may I have a mover for the next routine motion? Mr. Preston, please.
That the chair be authorized to hold meetings and receive evidence and to have that evidence printed when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 3 members are present, including 1 member of the opposition.
Agreed? Agreed. So carried. May I now have a mover for the next motion, distribution of documents, please? Mr. Proulx? Madame Robillard. My apologies. Madame Robillard?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, concerning distribution of documents, that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, and only when such documents exist in both official languages. Thank you very much.
Comment, Mr. Epp, please.
I noticed that last year there was included in there that witnesses be so informed, something to that effect, and be advised accordingly. I think that's wise, and I would recommend that we include that in the motion this year.
Sure. They are automatically. That's fine.
Okay. I'm wondering if our clerk could read the addition to the routine motion, adding the that witnesses be warned.
Well, the motion would read then that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute to the members of the committee documents, and only when they exist in both official languages, and that witnesses be advised accordingly.
Right. Very good. If you
Agreed.
need a formal amendment, we can do it that way, or just...
We'll accept the motion as read into the record. Agreed? So carried. Thank you. Need a mover for the next motion on the routines list, and any comment thereof. Any movers for the next motion, please? Monsieur Lemieux.
Sure. I move that the clerk of the committee be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Agreed? So carried. And another mover, please, for the next motion on the back of the page there, colleagues. Mr. Epp.
If requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses, not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives may be made at the discretion of the chair. How's that for a good reading?
That's excellent. Thank you, Mr. Epp. Agreed? So carried. I need a mover of the next motion, Monsieur Godin. S'il vous plaît.
That unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to be accompanied by 1 staff person at an in-camera meeting.
Madam, please.
Thank you. I would ask that there be an addition including the whip staff. I know that we have all whips represented here.
Is everybody understanding the addition? As read? Agreed?
Agreed.
Monsieur Godin, another comment?
Well, no, I want to question. J'aimerais questionner la.
I would like to question Ms. Redmond's position. Does that mean that every member can bring an employee from their staff and that the whip can bring 2?
That would be my interpretation.
Mr. Reid, further comment?
I'm confused. So essentially the whip would be able to bring in 2 people if the whip's a member of the committee, or even if the whip's not present, we could still have 1 person from the whip's office. Essentially it's whatever number of 1 per member plus 1 per whip per caucus. Would that sort of be what it means?
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
Just
Madam Redmond?
to clarify, Pierre may or may not have whip staff. It may be somebody from Jay Hill's office, but that every party's whip could be represented if they so chose.
Monsieur Godin, any further comment?
No, c'est juste que Monsieur.
No, it's just, Mr. Chairman, that we won't always be in this room. 112N is not very big. How many people can be brought in?
Could just make a comment. I think that 112 could accommodate that number of staff. We would get into a problem if there was more than that, but I think the minimum requirement here is 1 staff per member plus a staffer per party, per whip. That would I think that room could accommodate that number of people. when we get into business like this, members have requested that we move to a larger room, and we've been able to accommodate that. So if that's fair, Mr. Godin, I think we can accept this motion and then deal with it on a meeting-by-meeting basis if we need a larger room. Is that acceptable to members? Mr. Epp?
I would like further clarification. It was mentioned that there could be 2 members per whip. That's what I heard. I hope I didn't misunderstand that, because I would think that each whip should only be able to bring 1 member.
Madam Redmond, I'll allow you to explain, but what I'm sort of hearing is the opportunity, for example, on the government side, we do not have the whip here at this point. The whip is now not on the committee, so therefore the whip could send a staffer to the meeting. Whether Madam Redmond or Monsieur Guimont or Mr. Godin would have 2 people here at the same meeting, I don't know. But Madam Redmond, would you?
That was the intent, but to be quite candid, the only staff that accompany me is my whip staff person, so for me it doesn't make a difference. My one staff person would be a person from the whip's office. So if we want to clarify and say that if there's a whip staff person there, they would have to be somebody's representative as opposed to having individuals have 2 people, that's fine too. I guess it's just to clarify that if...
Let's leave it the way it was. You know, the whip,
I don't
the whip can
think
have a
it's as
staff here.
complicated.
I want to offer all members the opportunity to debate this. I do seem to think we're getting a little bit complicated on a reasonably simple matter. Is there further comment on it, Monsieur Godin?
Oui, on parle seulement à 8.
Yes, we're just talking about in-camera meetings. If it's an open meeting, we can bring as many people as we want. We're only talking about in-camera sessions.
Just in-camera meetings, confidential meetings. Colleagues, give you 5 seconds to think a little bit more, then I'll call the question.
I'm okay.
Okay. Calling the question on this motion. All in favor as read into the record? And so carried. Thank you. And if I could ask for a mover to the next routine motion, in-camera meetings transcripts. Monsieur Prou?
That one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee.
Carried. And I need a mover for the last one, Monsieur Guimont.
Oui, la dernière.
Yes, the final motion, Mr. Chairman, given that the clerk has explained to me earlier that this was an issue of routine motions that can be found really in any committee, I would remind you that this committee doesn't have any required notice of motion given the emergencies or critical situations that the Procedures Committee can be faced with under the standing orders. So I am asking that we not go to this notice of motions motion, so that there would be no notice required. Motions can be tabled at any meeting or at any time. So instead of having a committee dealing with private members' business, this is not in the list, and that's something I would like to discuss.
Motions, not amendments during a legislative study. This is on motions. Notice of motions.
Moi, je proposerais la motion suivante.
0 hours. Is that correct, Monsieur Guimont? 0 hours.
So,
Required notice.
C'est ça.
All right. Do we need to pass that motion?
that's right.
Just leaving it out then? Mr. I got lots of hands going up. Mr. Epp, then Mr. Reid, and then Monsieur Guimont.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I believe that it would be more reasonable, in order to protect all members of the committee from situations where they're being sort of taken by surprise, that there be, say, a 24-hour notice required. And then, of course, if the committee agrees, they can always, by unanimous consent, go ahead anyway with a motion if it's deemed necessary by everyone present.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I'm not...
Thank you, Mr. Epp. Mr. Reid, and then Monsieur Guimont.
That's okay, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Guimont, then Monsieur Prou, then Mr. Godin.
Comme membre permanent.
As a permanent member of this committee since 2000, for 7 years. If we proceed in this manner, things work very well. When there's a motion that is a surprise, that doesn't please most members of the committee, it is defeated on the spot, and that's called democracy. Therefore, I maintain that we should have 0 hours notice. 0 hour.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Mr. Poole? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the same vein, I think that it is not necessary to have any hours or minutes of notice. I think that motions can be tabled at will. Now, Mr. Godin. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say, as like Mr. Guimont, that I've been sitting on this committee since 2000, and the reason why we have chosen never to require notice is that we can report directly to the House of Commons on procedure and House affairs. So we can be dealing with urgent matters, and even a 24-hour notice requirement can be an obstacle to the House's work. We're overseeing the House's affairs and procedure. That's why the committee has its name. So I don't think we should have a notice required, and I think we've had this argument at the opening of every session, and we've all realized that we really need to be able to forge ahead and so that the House can do its work.
On the subject? What I'm sensing that the consensus will be is that the motion be left out. Is there any argument against that? We could hold a vote. We could read the motion in, and it could fail, but what are members advising the chair to do? I see the motion should be left out. 0 hours, no motion.
No, it will be no motion
no
here,
motion,
but it will be motion, though.
Okay. So I need a mover to read this motion. Monsieur Guimont brought up the 0 hours. I'll call on Mr. Guimont to read the motion in with 0 notice, and then we'll call the question. Monsieur Guimont?
Yes, I'm going to table a motion to ensure that we don't lose the sense of this notice of motion. I will just read it off the top of my head. Before the committee, no notice of motion to be required for any substantive motion, because in order to be able to table notice of motions on substantive motions that this committee is not yet considering, if we don't refer to the notice of motion, does that mean that we still have the right to table these motions on issues that are not directly related to the business of the committee? So I think without putting in the 0, I think we'll have to be able to give the committee the power to do this. Well, I think we should say that no notice be required for any substantive motion.
Okay, period. All right. I think what we have before us here is a simple motion that reads, Monsieur Guimont, please correct me if I've misunderstood the intent of your comments, but the intent, it seems to me, that this motion reads that no notice be required for any substantive motion, period.
Yes, that covers it. And moreover, that we're not necessarily being overly strict. We don't always have time to type the motions out to bring it to translation if it's an urgent matter. I have tabled motions that were just drafted in French, and my Anglophone colleagues have done the same in English, and the clerk acts as a translator through the interpreters, and that I'm satisfied with that.
The motion as moved by Mr. Guimont, please raise your hand. Opposed? We'll record one opposed, and the motion carries. We have another motion.
Yeah.
Who put up their hand first? I'm sorry. Monsieur Guimont?
Oui, ben c'est comme je vous disais.
Yes, as I was saying earlier, it was regarding the striking of a subcommittee on private members' business. I would move that pursuant to Standing Order 91.1 subsection 1 of the subcommittee on private members' business be composed of one member from each recognized party and a chair from the government party. The last time my colleague Mr. Lekuski had moved that our colleague Joe Preston be appointed chair of the subcommittee, and so I add that Joe Preston be appointed chair of the subcommittee.
My understanding is that the subcommittee on private members' business carries past prorogation, so we actually don't need to do this motion because it survives prorogation. So the committee is already set up. Mr. Preston's still the chair. It's all good. Everybody's happy? Perfect. I would like to jump, though, to one motion here, or one comment, if we're on private members' business. Subcommittee on private members' business. Mr. Godin? It's my understanding that Jean Crowder, who was the NDP member on the subcommittee on private members' business, is no longer an associate member of the main committee. As such, there is no current NDP member on the subcommittee. I understand that Chris Carleton, Charlton, my apologies, will now be the NDP member for the subcommittee on private members' business. And you're confirming that that's correct, just so that we read that into the record and the main committee is aware of that.
And just for your information, she's the deputy whip now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Colleagues, that finishes the routine motions. Oh, I'm sorry, of course. Madam Redmond was up first, and then Monsieur Proulx. Madam Redmond?
Thank you. It's nice to have those routine proceedings under our belt, and I would like to read to the committee, and I have copies of it in both official languages, a motion that I'd like the committee to consider. That the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs investigate the actions of the Conservative Party of Canada during the 2006 election, in relation to which Elections Canada has refused to reimburse Conservative candidates for illegitimate election campaign expenses. I also have for distribution, Mr. Chair, in both languages, what we would see from the Liberal perspective, a preliminary list of possible witnesses, and I would assume that other parties would also want to submit preliminary lists of witnesses, and that the committee could at a future date talk about who we would call.
Okay. Did you bring copies for everybody?
I have.
Possible? Bring enough gum for everybody?
Did I bring enough gum?
Perfect. We'll ask the clerk to hand out the motion.
How many did you get, James?
Well, I just grabbed one because I need one.
Oh, all right. There's another one.
Here's some more of the whip.
If I could continue, Mr. Chair, while we distribute them.
The witness list was French.
Thank you. I think this is a very important issue. We were seized with this issue back in August, and there were other issues before us at that point in time. However, I know that the veil voting issue is being dealt with. There's a motion before the House, and I guess we would wait until that worked its way through the House of Commons and was brought to this committee to be dealt with. And I understand there's also a very large issue having to do with the rural voters who, through inadvertence, could potentially be disenfranchised at an election because they have no municipal address. And I know, again, there is a separate process going forward where there are negotiations and wordings being discussed amongst all parties. So because that's being dealt with in another issue, another venue, I think it's very important that we deal with this very serious matter. And I guess I would put it before the committee for its discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Redmond. I'm not sure. I think I have to make a ruling on the motion. I want to just ask committee members. We've completed routine motions. There are some pieces of legislation coming forward in the near future that the steering committee in its informal meeting had chosen that when they do come, and I think you made that comment, that we would interrupt these types of proceedings to deal with legislation. And so I would like members to know that I'm expecting C-55 to be at this committee on November 13th, the first day back. I would therefore make the comment first that we might want to get our witness lists in for that as well. So we're prepared to go in both directions. However, it's expanded voting opportunities. The other days for advanced polling and C-55, the other days for advanced polling, you recall that? Opening up the possibility on Sundays and other opportunities. Colleagues, I will read this motion. Just give me a second to read this motion, then I'll make a comment. I'm going to, Madam Redmond, in keeping with my decision of the summertime, this motion is being re-entered. Just for the record, this motion is being re-entered because we are entering a new phase of Parliament, and all motions tend to die on the order paper. Madam Redmond has raised the motion, which is substantially similar to a motion raised in the summertime in September. I ruled at that point that this motion was out of order because it was beyond the scope of this committee. Mostly it was beyond the scope of this committee was my ruling, in that the Committee on Justice, etc., does not look into individual break-ins but sets the overall laws of the country and leaves the investigative aspects to other people. That was my ruling. I also warned the committee that this type of investigation could affect the Convention of Sub Judice. So I'm just reminding the committee of my ruling. I do know where this is going to go, but in keeping with my ruling in the summertime, I'm going to rule this motion out of order, and I'll wait to be overturned on that, but I am ruling it out of order. Madam Redmond, please.
I challenge the chair.
And the challenge is that the chair's ruling be set aside and that we move forward on it. All those that agree that the chair's ruling should be set aside, please raise your hands. Those, well, we've carried, so the chair's ruling has been overturned. Mr. Reid?
Vote on that, please.
You want a recorded vote on that?
Recorded vote on that, please.
I will ask the clerk then to call out the names, please.
All those in favor that the chair's ruling shall be sustained, Ms. Redmond? Shall the ruling be sustained?
Sustained. Against.
No. Monsieur Leblanc?
No.
Monsieur, Madame Rouillard?
No.
Monsieur Proulx? No. Monsieur Guimont? No. Monsieur Plamondon? No. Monsieur Godin?
Double no.
Mr. Reid?
Yes.
Mr. Lemieux?
Oui.
Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Mr. Abt?
Yes.
7 for overturned.
Same result. 7 to 4, colleagues. So the chair's ruling is overturned, and we are now at the stage of entertaining this motion. Mr. Reid, please.
Mr. Chairman, this motion is actually slightly different than the one that came forward in the summer, in that it has been artfully designed to make it more difficult to amend in order to allow the a similar investigation of the Liberal Party and its own activities from either 2006 or 2004. This, of course, is being done by the Liberals because the Liberals are fully aware that their party engaged in activities of similar nature, which were perfectly legal, and in addition, in previous elections, engaged in blatantly illegal acts, which included envelopes full of cash being given to 21 Quebec ridings. The Liberal Party engaged in the de facto theft of some $40 million of money from the public purse. They are protected in these actions by the fact that the statute of limitations on these wrongdoings, these virtually criminal wrongdoings, took place for the most part in a period which is beyond the period that the Commissioner of Elections is allowed to investigate under the pre-existing piece of electoral legislation, and therefore they want to have one standard apply to others, and not merely a lower standard applied to themselves, but indeed they want to ensure that their own previous completely illegal actions, which amounted to as I say, to theft from the taxpayers of millions, many millions of dollars, that these virtually criminal actions be out of any scope of investigation, either of the Chief Electoral Officer or of this House. And so they've designed this motion a little more artfully than they did in the summer to ensure that it's very hard to amend the motion to bring into account previous elections, previous investigations that should have taken place, and so on. Therefore, the amendment that I am going to propose, Mr. Chairman, seeks instead to remove the unfounded allegations that are woven into the text of this act or this motion, to replace them with less inflammatory language, without actually changing the substance of the motion, which would, of course, not be in order. What I propose, Mr. Chairman, is to remove the assertion that is made in the motion of an actual finding. The assertion made in the motion is that, well, it says, I'll just read it, Elections Canada has refused to reimburse Conservative candidates for illegitimate election campaign expenses. Of course, these are election campaign expenses that are alleged to be illegitimate. And again, the word illegitimate is used, again, very artfully. I suspect that Mr. Kevin Bosch, who's sitting there in the audience today, may have had a hand in this. Kevin can usually be relied upon to be involved in nefarious deeds when the Liberals are at work. For example, Kevin appears to have been involved in
Point of order. Point of order. This is unacceptable.
No, it's not, Karen. Taking those documents that included personal records from private offices, that was unacceptable, Mr. Chairman.
Colleagues, please address the chair. We'll keep some order here. And Mr. Reid, I'll allow you to continue. Maybe we should make our comments to the chair, please.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the artful wording is designed to ensure that we can ensure that individuals are hauled before this committee to discuss illegitimate. What does illegitimate mean? It means an illegal activity is one thing. A criminal activity, that means the illegitimate is a subjective term, and that's why it's being used here. If the objection is that Elections Canada is alleging that expenses were made that are not in conformity with the Canada Elections Act, that is one thing. But if you go back and examine what the Liberals have stood up and said day after day in the House of Commons in question period, they never actually say.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, or maybe a point of clarification. I understand that Mr. Reid is within a point of order. I have a sense that is he on debate? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mr. Reid, please.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm on debate. And what I'm debating is the substance of the motion before us. If the complaint and the request for discussion is of discussion as to whether or not expenses have been made that are within what is permitted under the Canada Elections Act. Well, that's fair. I suspect it to be beyond the scope of this committee, but that's a decision where I shared your opinion, Mr. Chairman, and the majority of the committee members did not. My concern, of course, is that there is not one but two court proceedings underway on this very subject, where Elections Canada, on the one hand, is asserting that some expenses were made that were beyond the scope of what's permitted under the Canada Elections Act. On the other hand, the Conservative Party of Canada asserts not only that these are permissible, but that indeed they are permissible and reimbursable, and Elections Canada is failing in its obligations, its legal obligations under the Canada Elections Act to reimburse those expenses, specifically expenses made by riding associations for advertising, which are subject to a 60% reimbursement under the terms of the Canada Elections Act, and that in not doing so, the Elections Canada is not following its a legitimate interpretation of the law. What's important to remember here is these are different interpretations of the Canada Elections Act that have not yet been decided by the courts. And just as the Conservative Party of Canada is not alleging and would not allege that the Elections Canada is acting illegitimately in so doing, it is also the case that Elections Canada is not asserting that the Conservative Party acted illegitimately, and certainly not the language that people out there in TV land are supposed to interpret this as meaning, which is illegally or unlawfully. These are legitimate alternative points of view which are being dealt with through seeking one of our legal tribunals, the courts, to rule on what in fact is the correct interpretation of the Canada Elections Act. But the Liberals are frankly short of scandals. No, they're long on scandals. They're short on finding scandals that somebody else is involved in, and are hoping they can turn this committee into a gong show, having failed to make the House of Commons into a gong show at which their allegations will be picked up and treated seriously by the media. I think that's unfortunate, and in order to prevent that from occurring, Mr. Chairman, I propose that the motion be amended in the following manner. That, in the second last line of the English version, following the word for, the following words be added that are alleged not to be in conformity with the expense limits under the Canada Elections Act. Sorry, actually, I should stop here, Mr. Chairman. I should have said after the word expenses that these words would be added in the last line, and that in the second last line the word illegitimate be removed. So it would now read, Elections Canada has refused to reimburse Conservative candidates for election campaign expenses that are alleged not to be in conformity with the expense limits under the Canada Elections Act. And that, Mr. Speaker, well, I can continue on debate later on, but that is the substantial change that I'm suggesting.
Okay, colleagues, we have an amendment, suggested amendment to the motion, the original motion. Just give us a second to confirm the exact wording. Mr. Reid, could you, read the final wording after the wording of your amendment after the words elections campaign expenses that are alleged not to be in conformity?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Why don't I just give you the text that I've written down here so
Thank
you
you.
can copy.
Are alleged.
Colleagues, we're back. I'm just going to read the last line for members.
Read the whole thing.
I'll read the whole thing then. It's hopefully just in the English, which is my specialty, I suppose. I have ruled the amendment to be in order. It is within the scope of the original motion. That the Standing Committee on Procedures and House Affairs investigate the actions of the Conservative Party of Canada during the 2006 election, in relation to which Elections Canada has refused to reimburse Conservative candidates for election campaign expenses that are alleged not to be in conformity with the expense limits under the Canada Elections Act. That's the amendment. All right, we're going to debate the amendment now. Monsieur LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to address the amendment directly, Mr. Chairman, we have never alleged that the problem was with the limits. Elections Canada has found, so I don't think we need to use the word alleged, because it is a finding of Elections Canada that the expenses were not incurred by the candidate's campaign, but more properly by the national campaign. That is the issue here, Mr. Chairman. It's not whether the limits were too high or too low, or did the expenses come within the campaign's limits. In fact, we will argue that the expenses exceed the national campaign limit because Elections Canada has rejected them as having been incurred by the local candidate. So Mr. Reid is very clever and very able at sort of trying to sideline an issue, trying to obfuscate or trying to buy some time. We've been around this mulberry bush, Mr. Chairman, in September. The issue is Elections Canada has found a number of Conservative candidates, some of whom are sitting members, put on their campaign returns expenses which Elections Canada has held to not be acceptable as incurred by a local campaign. Hence, they have rejected them and refused refunds to those campaigns, 60% of which would have come from taxpayers' money. Elections Canada has refused that. The Conservative Party is, in our view, wasting more taxpayers' money by trying to go to court to buy time, arguing that, in fact, they're entitled to these bogus refunds. Mr. Chairman, the reason we want to look at this is because a number of Conservative candidates have actually asked and offered to come and explain why they were bullied into this scheme, why they were told that they had to participate. Monsieur Jean Landry, un candidat conservateur à la province du Québec, a dit...
A Conservative candidate in Quebec said many times to Jean Landry before television cameras that he was obliged to participate in this plan. He did not believe it was legitimate, and he quite frankly indicated that he was looking forward to the opportunity to come forward and testify publicly to the fact that the Conservative Party insisted that he participate. The same thing last week, I received a call from another Conservative candidate, Ms. Fortier, who said that she wanted to come and testify. She called my office to volunteer to come and testify about the situation, which is not clear. So, Mr. Chairman, we want to avoid the Conservatives' delaying tactics and proceed with this. Mr. Reid's proposed amendment completely changes the exercise here. The question is that Elections Canada has refused to reimburse amounts to Conservative candidates for publicity that they bought locally, but that Elections Canada had judged to be indeed national campaign expenses. So unfortunately, if we add up these expenses, the Conservative Party probably overspent by $1 million at the national level.
The issue is a technical one. Why Elections Canada believes that 66 Conservative returns, and we believe, in fact, there are others that Elections Canada should look at, including a Conservative candidate in Guelph, which we saw last night, whom we saw last night was, in fact, turfed as a candidate. We believe that that campaign also may warrant a review by Elections Canada, and we find it strange that he would simply unceremoniously be dumped as a candidate yesterday, but the Conservative Party can explain why they've moved so far from their grassroots democracy of some years ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Monsieur Godin.
Monsieur le Président, je ne prendrai pas beaucoup de temps dessus, mais je pense que c'est ça, c'est exactement...
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it needs to be clear. A political party at the national level has X number of dollars to spend. There's a limit, and it can't be done through the back door if it cannot be done through the front. This is a way of tricking the system, and I don't think it's any more honest to go and proceed in that way. So if the Conservative Party has nothing to hide, we should move forward and have our investigation here at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, which is responsible, and Elections Canada reports to this committee. So, Mr. Chairman, if we look at the sponsorship scandal back at that time. The RCMP was involved. There was the Gomery Commission, and at the same time, the parliamentary committee undertook to respect its responsibilities and look into this. And the Conservatives were quite in agreement with that at the time. They had no difficulty with it. So they strongly supported this at the time, and they can review those arguments if they wish. Now, at this point in time, Mr. Chairman, it's clear that the Conservative Party, according to the information that we have, spent their maximum amount in 2006, and they looked to their candidates to see how they could pump more money into that campaign. So it's as though they were hooked up to the Alberta pipeline and the money was just pouring in. So they went to help people in various ridings, supposedly, but on top of all of that, they want to be reimbursed for these monies by the taxpayers. If they have nothing to hide, they should not support Mr. Reid's amendment. We should proceed with the study, and if there's nothing there, you'll be very happy tomorrow. The Conservative Party, now that Elections Canada has said that this was not correct, we can bring forward the witnesses we need to hear from and clarify the issue. Now, the Chair, you might suggest that if the Conservative Party decides to prevent the committee from doing its work and filibuster the committee, it means that they do have something to hide. And that's what they are getting involved in right now. If they want to stop the committee from doing its work, I think that Canadians can see that the Conservatives have something to hide. So for those reasons, I will not support the amendment. I would like to go straight to the motion now and then proceed with our investigation. And I don't want to repeat myself, but if the Conservatives don't go along with that, it means they have something to hide from Canadians.
Amendment. Mr. Preston, you were next, and then Mr. Epp, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I find it extremely strange, I guess, that we're being accused of having something to hide when we had just a motion to say, go ahead and look at the books. I mean, it's Mr. Chair, I can't seem to put those two things together. We're simply asking for a wording change in this motion at this moment to take out some, whatever we want to look at it. We're looking at changing the motion to, we think, be clearer as to what the current situation is. I have no problem with changing the wording in the motion to get to that result. I think at the end of the day we get to the chance to look at, we get to do what the motion says. I think that if we can adjust the wording to what Mr. Reid has said, I think it makes it a little bit, to use a word in the motion, makes it a little bit more legitimate of a motion, and it lets us get down to, let's just clarify the facts. I also would like to do it. You mentioned certain other investigations that parliamentary committees have done in this House, and that it is the right of parliamentary committees to move forward and do those types of investigations. But I would think that at no time should we close our eyes and be narrowly focused as to what we're trying to look at. I mean, the narrower you make this motion, then the less work this committee can do. And I think what we're asking here is that we move this motion outwards, expand it to make it so that we can look at all things that happened. And I think that's only fair that this committee is allowed to do its work. So I will be supporting Mr. Reid's amendment to this motion so that we can get down to actually looking at facts rather than scandal mongering here in the committee. So I'd like us to get to work.
Thank you, Mr. Epp.
Thank you very much. I want to just respond to one thing that Monsieur Gaudin said. He indicated that being against this motion as originally worded seems to imply that the Conservative Party has something to hide. Well, Mr. Chairman, in a way, the attempt by the opposition here today is to change this committee into a court. And unfortunately, when we have in our legal system in this country, just because a person pleads not guilty doesn't mean that they are. I mean, and that's the assumption that he is making, that if we protest this, that somehow we are admitting that we have something to hide, that we're guilty. That is just the opposite, Mr. Chairman. We have, I believe, a committee here that should be, in essence, nonpartisan, and it's turning into a very, very partisan thing. It's true the opposition outnumbers the Conservative members in this committee, but it has become partisan. And just the wording of this motion that says that these are illegitimate expenses presupposes the outcome of the hearing. And I think that it does a disservice to this committee to behave in such a way. And then, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman, I have one more little comment. In my riding, in the 5 elections that I have run there, it's my opinion, and I don't want to state this as fact because I would have to check it out, but in every one of those election campaigns, the NDP in my riding, I don't think had enough support to raise enough money so that they could have run a campaign. And they always received money from the National Party, as far as I know. And, Mr. Chairman, if they would have ever had enough votes so that they were eligible for a reimbursement of expenses, I'm sure that they would have put them in as local expenses. And the same thing is true for the Green Party. The Green Party, to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman, used a national campaign in every one of the ridings. I know in my riding there were no local signs at all. They were national campaign signs. And that money came from headquarters for the most part, in my opinion. Okay, I'm being as loose here as I can because I'm just going on my perceptions of what happened. I didn't pay a great deal of attention to this at the time of our election campaigns because that was not my focus at that time. But I really think that this committee, Mr. Chairman, should focus on the wide general principle, if they want to examine it, to see whether the Elections Act and the conditions that are spelled out in that Act have been carried for all parties. That, I think, would be legitimate. The fact that they are here trying to single out one party to the exclusion of the others, I think belies their partisan motives. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just mention to members that we are debating the amendment to the original motion. Madam Redmond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add a couple of comments. One of the reasons why I cannot support the amendment that Mr. Reid has put forward is because, quite frankly, it's factually incorrect. And I guess I would point out, just to speak a little bit to Mr. Epps' concerns, is the fact that the mandate of this committee in the standing orders under Section 3, subsection 6, talks about the review of and report on all matters relating to the election of members of the House of Commons. So it certainly is within the purview and definition of this committee to be looking at this issue. I'd also point out that we're not asking for the audit of any party. Every party, every candidate files audits of their financial transactions during a campaign with Elections Canada. These allegations have been made by Elections Canada against the Conservative Party alone, not against the Green, the NDP, the Bloc, or the Liberals. Also, none of the opposition parties are leveling these allegations. They are coming from Elections Canada. It is absolutely in the purview of this committee and appropriate that we look at this, and for that reason I will not support the amendment. And then I would ask if we could move forward on the issue at hand.
I think you're asking me to call the question. I can't because I still have speakers on the list. Mr. Reid, Monsieur Lemieux, and then Monsieur Godin, and then we have no other speakers. Mr. Reid, please.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Redmond just asserted a moment ago that she opposes my proposed amendment because it's factually inaccurate. She didn't actually then go on and point anything out, so I'm assuming that she is not actually referring to some new factual inaccuracy she was going to point to, but rather to something that had been pointed out in previous comments. So I'm assuming that she's referring back to Mr. LeBlanc's earlier commentary in which he objected to my use of the word in the motion, the word alleged. And he went on and used the terms that Elections Canada has found the limits were violated and Elections Canada has held. Those are the two words he used. Held, that it's done. Of course, held and alleged are actually synonyms, Mr. Speaker. And perhaps I'll send a thesaurus over to Mr. LeBlanc's office to assist him in these matters for future reference. But certainly found, I suppose one could argue, findings in law that is somewhat different. I would point out, therefore, to Mr. LeBlanc that Elections Canada is not a court. Elections Canada is an administrative body. It does indeed come up with interpretations of the law. It also stresses in those interpretations, and members of the committee will recall the fact that I actually drew attention to this point when Mr. Miron, our Chief Electoral Officer, was here as a witness before our committee prior to his appointment. Interpretations, it issues these interpretation bulletins, and it says these are not, in fact, binding. These are our interpretations, which are subject to court review. So Elections Canada itself does not assert that it makes findings. It makes interpretations that are tentative, that it expressly states are tentative. I mean, they're sincerely held interpretations. They are interpretations that Mr. Miron, the other people who work there, believe are the correct interpretation of the law. But they are not themselves an adjudicative body. They are not a judicial body. They are not a quasi-judicial body. They are a body that seeks to enforce the law, look for potential infractions if it finds them of the Canada Elections Act, and then at that point there are a variety of remedies available, but they all ultimately involve going to court and settling the matter in court, which is what's going on now. And because they also administer the law in an active way, such as handing out rebates, it is completely legitimate for someone who, again, with a genuine, sincere belief, thinks that they have been denied a rebate which they are owed, can go and seek redress. But you have to go to some other body, such as a court, to do this, because that's the way the system is set up. But Mr. LeBlanc would not have us use the court system. He would have us use a body, this committee, as a sort of parallel process, which would decide on offenses that are not actually under the law. They're under whatever interpretation the Liberals think they can spin of what is legitimate and illegitimate. The court is the court of public opinion, of course. Their hope is that they can then control the nature of the hearing so as to ensure that a practice that is carried out by the Conservatives and also by the Liberals is seen as being illegitimate when the Conservatives do it, but there's no opportunity to demonstrate that the Liberals do the same thing, by way of example. They also are anxious to make sure that their own prior practices, some of which, as I pointed out, were not merely in violation of the Canada Elections Act, but were acts of theft from the Canadian public to the tune of millions of dollars, are also excluded from the investigation. They stressed, actually, Mrs. Redmond made an interesting point where we don't want to have get involved in the audits. Well, no. Audits are appropriate when you have someone like our colleague from West Vancouver's Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, who appears to be channeling money in envelopes to have over-the-limit expenses. Of course, a Liberal MP who, according to his own family members, was funneling envelopes of cash to pay for various over-the-limit expenses. So, Mr. Chairman, what's going on here is an attempt in the amendment, the proposed amendment, to remove the language that presupposes guilt and use language that is anodyne, language that simply states in a non-inflammatory way, a non-prejudging or prejudicial way, what the actual factual dispute is about. It seems to me that this suggestion is vastly superior to the original suggestion. I mean, the original suggestion, the point of the original suggestion, let's understand what's going on here. This is a partisan body where all the votes are taking place on partisan lines, where the speeches are designed for the cameras as opposed to having a finding of fact that's legitimate and valid. And what's going on here is an attempt to ensure that we can all leave at the end of this committee hearing with the ability for the Liberals to run up before the cameras and say, oh, look, the committee has investigating the illegitimate actions of one of the parties here. This proves, because the courts don't count, apparently, in the mind of the Liberals. This proves that these terrible, terrible, illegitimate, not illegal, just illegitimate, and according to some standard that we have in our pocket and we aren't going to share with the public, practice is taking place, and we should all be scandalized and horrified and whatever, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman, rather. So I think that the suggestions are frankly, well, they're inaccurate. But I do get the impression that the Liberal members have made up their minds as to how they're going to vote, and on the basis that we're unlikely to get a fair or reasonable hearing, even to changing the language in a way that doesn't affect the substance, only removes the presupposition of guilt. Since I think it's clear that we're not going to get a fair hearing, even for that minor change, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to withdraw my proposed amendment.
Does the member have unanimous consent to withdraw his amendment to the motion? Does the member have unanimous consent? We're missing one member. Everybody's okay to withdraw the amendment? The amendment is withdrawn. We will resume debate on the main motion. And Mr. Reid, are you wanting to stay? I have Monsieur Lemieux, Monsieur Gaudin, and Mr. Preston on the main motion now, because the amendment's been withdrawn. Please, Mr. Reid.
I think my name got on the list for the main motion, and I then used that opportunity to introduce the amendment. So I think, strictly speaking, I probably used up that speaking opportunity.
I'm going to suggest you have. Monsieur Lemieux is next. Mr. Gaudin, do you have a point?
Well, but I was for the amendment.
Is this a point, Mr. Gaudin, a point of order?
Oui.
Okay.
Point of order.
Merci.
Mon collègue.
My colleague Ken Epps was saying that the Green Party, the NDPs, have already paid for signs, but you have to remember that there was no contradiction there was no problem with Elections Canada saying that we acted improperly. But I just want to make it clear, so that it's clear for everyone here at the committee, that the issue before us, this motion, deals with the fact that the Conservative Party went beyond the limit of their national expenses. Someday I hope we might do that. We've never had enough money to do that, but we can't be accused.
Folks, when I call order, I would hope that you would not force me to have your microphones turned off. That is debate. I am allowing a lot of lateral movement on the debate, but we are back to the main motion at this point. And Monsieur Lemieux, you are on my list, followed by Mr. Gaudin, followed by Mr. Preston.
I'd like to put forward an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
It would read as follows, that the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs investigate the actions of the Conservative Party of Canada during the 2004 and 2006 federal elections in relation and in comparison to the election campaign expenses of the Liberal Party of Canada, and where Elections Canada has refused to reimburse some Conservative candidates for election campaign expenses.
I need it written.
Would you have a copy of that, please, Mr. Lemieux?
Yep, by all means.
We're going to take just a moment to make sure that it's within the scope.
Maybe just around Vancouver West, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky country. Maybe just that. Oh, sorry.
Please. Colleagues, I've read the amendment. Colleagues have heard the amendment. The amendment I'm ruling in order. And Monsieur Lemieux?
Yeah, I think it's important that we have a real honest look at this amendment. One of the things that the Conservative Party has always said is that our practices have been in full conformance with the law. They follow the spirit of the law. They follow the letter of the law. And they're in accordance with the practices of other parties. And I think that this is a key point, that they are in accordance with the practices of other parties. And I believe the Liberals would be the first to say, although it's hard to believe, that this is not a partisan attack, that their motion is not partisan at all. They want to have a fair and equitable look at what happened in the last election. If this is true, then let's open the books of our party. Let's open the books of the Liberal Party in 2004 and 2006. And I think what we'll see is that when we state, in fact, that our actions have been in accordance with the actions of other parties, we will, in fact, find that. So I think it's an important distinction, and I think that this is worthy of debate, and it should be supported by my fellow members around the table.
Thank you. Mr. Lemieux. Monsieur Godin.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I think you cut me off during the point of order. I think I maybe should have said it was a point of information. But when the NDP transferred funds, it's because they were not at their limit for the national campaign. And I think this is clear. The only returns that have been refused by Elections Canada were the transfers with the 60% rebate. The only ones refused were from the Conservative Party, and that's what we're studying at this point in time. Elections Canada did not say that we did something that was not right, and I think that there are regulations for the Canada Elections Act that clearly state that you cannot go beyond the national limits. And that is what we're discussing here. Beyond that limit, they transferred funds to ridings, and they wanted to get a rebate for those excess amounts that were spent. So I would say to my colleague, Mr. Epp, that there's a very huge difference between the two.
Confused, Mr. Godin. Maybe you can clarify. You're suggesting that the motion that we're debating, or that we're wanting to debate and now has been amended, is actually not dealing with the legitimacy of the transfers from the national party to the local parties, because in fact the NDP have done that. The issue is that those transfers went beyond the limit? I'm confused. Okay, I'm hearing that that's what you said, but that's not what you meant.
Non, j'ai dit la question.
Would you mind just...
Non, qu'est-ce que je dis, Monsieur le Président?
What I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is that Mr. Epp made accusations, and I'm saying that we are not under investigation by Elections Canada, and that what is important here is what the Conservatives did. They're the ones being investigated by Elections Canada, and on top of that, they're ready to continue with that investigation. That is what I wanted to say.
Please, we are now going to Mr. Preston.
Thank you very much. I love the thought that we're willing to move forward and have everything brought to the table and have witnesses called here today or soon, so this committee can look at the issues that we're talking about, but that everyone else wants to hold up a wall or a barn door in front of their party and say, but not us, but not us. We're happy to move forward and talk legitimately about what Elections Canada is doing, but the rest, specifically the Liberals in this motion, would like it not to be come see, come south. Would happen for them too. You know, this is just you know, we talk about democracy. Of course, they have some trouble with that lately in their voting habits, but we talk about democracy, and we'd like to look at all things. And I think that this motion moves that forward in a very legitimate way, that we will look at. We're opening up 2 years or 2 different elections. We're opening up our party, and we'd like them to say, you know what, we've got nothing to hide. Let's look at our books too. If they can't say that today, then we'll understand where it's coming from. Mr. Chair, I think that the motion is, you've ruled it in order, and I think it's very appropriate for the people of Canada.
We're discussing the amendment.
Yes.
That's fine. I understand completely. Mr. LeBlanc and then Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to Mr. Lemieux's amendment, once again, Mr. Chairman, the Conservative filibuster continues. We went around this same mulberry bush in September. Mr. Chairman, let's understand what they're doing. Mr. Godin is absolutely right. The issue is not about whether parties can transfer monies to local campaigns. That is an accepted practice. Elections Canada has not ruled or held or found, whatever word Mr. Reid appreciates, that this was the problem. The issue is that the Conservative Party transferred money to individual ridings for expenses which Elections Canada has ruled, held, and found are not, in fact, legitimate local expenses. They were not incurred by the campaign. They were, in fact, national campaign advertising expenses. And Mr. Godin is right. The problem with that for everybody is that then they suddenly exceed the national spending limit by over $1 million. So, with respect to the amendment, again, trying to delay the committee's conclusion, Mr. Lemieux talks about the 2004 election. I would hope he'd have a chance to read Professor Flanagan's book. Professor Flanagan makes it very clear that they thought about doing this scheme in 2004, didn't have the money, decided against it, but good news, in 2006, they found a way to get around the federal national spending limits by doing exactly this scheme. So Professor Flanagan, I think, can enlighten Conservative colleagues with respect to the 2004 campaign. Alors, la question demeure, Monsieur le Président.
So the question remains, in 2004, Professor Flanagan was very clear. The Conservatives had considered getting around the Elections Act in 2004 for whatever reasons. Maybe they didn't have enough money, perhaps they were uncertain, perhaps they thought they would lose anyway, so they didn't do it in 2004. So Mr. Lemieux's amendment is only intended to slow down the process. It's a filibuster. And Professor Flanagan concluded that in 2006, however, the Conservatives have found a very ingenious way of getting around those limits and overspending by $1 million.
Concerted effort from a national campaign. It's not about a local candidate that lost some receipts for pizzas. That's not the issue. The issue is that 66 Conservative campaigns, and we've heard from some of their candidates, pressured by the national campaign, aggressive emails from people like Mr. Donison saying that, you must sign a bank transfer before we transfer you the money. It's just an in-and-out transaction. Those are their words. Mr. Chairman, again, Mr. Lemieux is trying to say that, well, we should look at other parties' practices. Well, Elections Canada has looked at every other party's practices, and Elections Canada has found that only the Conservative Party practices, in fact, don't comply with the law. Alors, l'idée ridicule que, il faut regarder qu'est-ce que les autres...
So the ridiculous idea that we have to look at what other parties did during other elections doesn't hold any water, because Elections Canada, that has a mandate of applying the law, of enforcing the law, they are the ones who found that only the Conservative Party in 2006 had, in 66 ridings, and perhaps more, gotten around the legislation in some ways. And they refused to reimburse the illegitimate expenses with taxpayers' money, and they opened an inquiry that may potentially bring us to criminal investigations.
Attempt to evade the election financing limits by using an in-and-out laundromat. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lemieux is not sincere when he suggests that we should look at other parties' practices.
Point of order,
Elections Canada,
Elections Canada
looks at them.
Chairman, it is out of order to question the sincerity of another member.
Especially
Continue.
I'll rephrase it. Mr. Lemieux is not worthy when he suggests that Elections Canada should look at...
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I'm sure that it's just the heat of the moment, but just as I regard everything that this member has done as being worthy of his place here, I think that he would want to have similarly appropriate sentiments towards all other members of this House.
I'll agree and caution the member one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lemieux's suggestion that other parties need to be looked at in the same motion is not in fact valid. The reason being Elections Canada, which has the mandate to apply the legislation, looks at every party's campaign returns, and Elections Canada has held that only the Conservative Party have participated in this systematic scheme in 66 campaigns and perhaps more. So the idea that people need to show their books, people need to open their books, every party and every candidate under the law does that with Elections Canada. Elections Canada, in our view, does a very thorough job, and in the exercise of that legislated mandate, they have found the Conservative Party to have, in fact, not met the requirements of the law. That's the issue here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Mr. LeBlanc, Mr. Reid, and then Mr. Lemieux. Mr. Reid, if I could just take a second. Members, I will take a few minutes at the end of this meeting to discuss witness lists, so especially in preparation for the first meeting back after the break. Mr. Reid, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there are a number of things that Mr. LeBlanc said that I think are factually incorrect, although I won't cast aspersions on him as to why he said them. But I do want to point out his use of excessive language, which I think is the underlying problem here, and this is the reason I proposed the amendment I proposed. He used the term laundromat, for example. I assume I won't assume an intention. I'll say what I think the practical implications of using value-laden or hyperbolic language are. Laundromat, money laundering. I assume that some people out there might get the implication from the overheated rhetoric that's being tossed around this room by Mr. LeBlanc and others that something of that nature is going on. Well, let's understand what money laundering is. Money laundering is the activity of going out and creating imaginary activities such as gambling winnings in order to hide money which came from some illegal original source, such as buying and selling drugs, by way of example. Something of that nature. This is so far removed from what's going on here that even they aren't actually prepared to say it here, where they're protected by parliamentary privilege and all that sort of thing, because it's outrageous. But in terms of just kind of putting out the rhetoric in the hope that it gets picked up and misunderstood, well, there's no problem doing that, Mr. Chairman. What is going on is, in fact, and when he described it, Mr. LeBlanc had to actually point this out in his remarks, is that Elections Canada, which is not an adjudicative body, it is a body that interprets the Act, that tends to apply it, and then has to, when its interpretation comes into conflict with other interpretations, has to refer it to a higher authority. They have provided an interpretation, and they have gone, as he said, referred it, these are his exact words, referred it to the Commissioner of Elections. They've sent it to a higher authority who has some adjudicative power, although ultimately he too has to go to the courts. So Elections Canada is not merely one step away from actually being an adjudicative body, it's actually 2 steps away. It doesn't actually conduct actual legal proceedings before the courts. That's done by the Commissioner of Elections. So here we are with the accusation, well, it's all over. Elections Canada has made their ruling. Let's not wait for those silly courts. I mean, let's get on to the serious business of trying to impose some kind of double jeopardy here in this chamber and come up with a court that we hope will spin this issue in the short run as being some kind of horrible thing. Of course, in the end, the courts will go along and they'll rule, and they'll either rule, Mr. Chairman, that A, the Conservative Party and its various official agents were acting within the terms of the Canada Elections Act by spending money in a way that was legitimate, perhaps not a way that the Liberals had anticipated, or that they had the cash to do themselves in 2006, because in 2006, unlike 2004, they were short of cash, as Mr. LeBlanc points out. But the thing that is relevant here is that the Elections Canada will either have its interpretation upheld or not upheld. And if it's not upheld, then they will actually owe money to the Conservative Party of Canada for legitimate expenses incurred by the Conservative Party of Canada. Now, on the other hand, there's always the possibility, although I personally must say, based on a mature examination of the facts, that I think in this case Elections Canada is incorrect, but it could turn out that their interpretation of the law is in fact the one that the courts uphold. And if the courts do uphold this particular interpretation of the law, then what would happen is that there would be certain limited consequences under the law. But we're not talking about anything as radical or extreme as what Mr. LeBlanc's words would imply. The word illegitimate is inappropriate, and the sort of, the implications of something, much, much deeper and more devious than that are just out of place. And the only reason that he can get away with saying them here is because this is a body that doesn't have the restraints that exist in the court system, which, Mr. Chairman, is why we don't actually adjudicate cases in the House of Commons or its committees. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, why we make a policy of not trying to have findings of fact at all in these bodies. They're simply inappropriate for this purpose. Our goal is to try and work on policy and to make sure that policy is enforced. Mr. Chairman, I want to mention something else with regard to Elections Canada's interpretation of this law. You would think that, based on the comments of Mr. LeBlanc and some of the other Liberal members here, that getting an interpretation of the law from Elections Canada is kind of akin in its level of authority to going up Mount Sinai and speaking to the burning bush. You would think that we ought to be treating these interpretations with the same respect that would be shown to Moses as he came down the mountain with the Ten Commandments on his, under his arm. And this is the same group of people who were attacking and ridiculing the Chief Electoral Officer for his ruling on veiled voting, his interpretation of the law on veiled voting. So I don't know. Is it their position that this is a guy who can't interpret the law at all, who just doesn't understand the law? Or is it their position that the Chief Electoral Officer, his interpretation of the law is holy writ, notwithstanding the fact that the law itself says that his interpretation is meant to go through a process, two processes actually, going to the Commissioner of Elections, who then makes his decision, and then off to the court system before we get a ruling, because he's fallible. They want to have their cake and eat it too, of course, and we suspect that they want to have their cake in the 2004 election, and then when somebody else does the same thing in the 2006 election, say, oh no, that's not legitimate. And this is part of the reason, not the whole reason, but it's certainly part of the reason why the Liberals absolutely don't want the 2004 election discussed at all. Because there was a time, Mr. Chairman, I remember this very well, I was in Parliament at the time, when the Liberal Party was awash in cash and everybody else wasn't. And they were engaged in actions, some of them completely legal, that were parallel to this action. Some of them, quite frankly, completely illegal. I don't just mean in violation of the Elections Act, I mean in violation of the law, period. The transferring of funds in envelopes of cash to 21 Quebec ridings by the Liberal Party. Mr. Gaudin was quite correct when he said that it is legitimate to transfer funds to ridings, but it's legitimate to transfer them when you record the amounts and when you keep them under a certain amount and when they are receipted. It's not legitimate to have envelopes stuffed with cash any more than it was legitimate for all those Liberal operatives to turn up and have those envelopes of cash that the Gomery Commission was looking into in that particular Liberal scandal. So to say that Mr. LeBlanc's comments missed the point would be an understatement, Mr. Chairman. The Liberals don't want, I can think of 3 good, solid reasons why they don't want to allow this motion to be amended to include their expenses, along with our expenses, and to examine 2004 plus 2006. They want to focus just on 2006, just in the Conservative Party. But there are 4 reasons, Mr. Chairman, and as far as I can see, they are the following. Number 1, it would soon become apparent that the Liberals have done the very same thing themselves, which is okay because it's legitimate. But, I mean, this is a pattern you see with these guys. Do you remember the Rosh Hashanah crisis? That was when it turned out that somebody had received a Rosh Hashanah card from, I can't remember if it was from the Prime Minister or from a Conservative MP. Anyways, it was a great scandal, and the member from Thornhill, who's a Liberal, was up. You know, it was a crisis. Where did this come from? What nefarious means were used to get the name of this individual and send them a Rosh Hashanah card? Then it turned out that the very same member had been sending Rosh Hashanah cards herself to people who had not provided her with any of the information that she found to be so mysterious. So, Mr. Chairman, what you see going on is something that's acceptable when Liberals do it is a scandal when somebody else does it. And then when people notice that, well, actually, you know, Liberals were doing it as well as those dastardly Conservatives, well, suddenly it's not an issue anymore, and it just drops right off the agenda. Well, we just won't discuss it anymore. This is their way of operating in this Parliament. In the absence of any actual scandals to point to, what they'll do is invent some, just dig into their own bag, find the acts they've been engaged in themselves that weren't actually illegal, and then say, well, those other guys are doing these things too. We'll just hope nobody notices we were doing it, and we'll accuse them of doing things that are illegitimate, presented as if illegitimate and illegal are the same thing, and then we can engage in a parallel system to whatever court proceedings are going on. I mean, I'm sure we could embarrass anybody in this room if we said, well, we're going to have this committee investigate the contents of their sock and underwear drawer. I think if we all had our sock and underwear drawers investigated, we would be equally embarrassed. So let's just focus on one guy's sock and underwear drawer and not anybody else's and hope we can embarrass him. But the fact is that having unsorted socks in your sock drawer isn't necessarily against the rules. There are a whole bunch of other things, you know, that there are. But having household messes and whatever are not illegal. They're not illegitimate. This isn't illegal. This isn't illegitimate. But if we can just focus on one particular party's actions, decontextualize them, then we think maybe we'll get some media pickup. That's reason number one. Now, reason number two, the Liberals want to discuss 2006 and not 2004, is that they were awash in cash themselves in 2004. 2006, they were short of cash. Things had changed. The Conservative Party, which is much better at raising money, apparently, than the Liberal Party is, at least raising money legally, well, I hear one of my opponents commenting on this. I don't think anybody would dispute that the returns that we got in just recently that showed that the Conservative Party raised about $3 million in its reports to Elections Canada was not all funds that were raised legally, and that I think it's $800,000 the Liberals raised were not raised legally. The point is we're getting about 4 times as much cash as they are. And this has been a phenomenon that's been going on for some time. So the Liberals were short of cash. They didn't have the option of doing certain things. So once they can't do something, then it changes from being a legitimate action to an illegitimate action. It's only good when the Liberals can do it. When, over time, circumstances change as well, that crisis brought on by the fact that nobody wants to give the Liberal Party money because nobody trusts them to govern the country becomes grounds for the actions of anybody else who is raising money and spending it legally is now a crisis, an illegitimate action. But to make sure that the embarrassment that occurred when Susan Katis was shown as having given out Rosh Hashanah cards after accusing others of being nefarious for doing the same thing, to prevent that from happening, we have to word this so that we exclude the period when we ourselves were engaged in these kinds of activities because we ourselves had more substantial money at our disposal. So that's reason number 2 of the 4 reasons. Reason number 3, Mr. Chairman, is because the Liberals are not anxious to go into the past and potentially further into the past. You may recall when this issue came up in early September, and we were having meetings of this committee at that time, that proposals were made to amend a similar Liberal motion to go back to further elections, not just 2004, but to go back to further elections. These are the elections where the envelopes of cash were flying around. These are the ones that are actually beyond the statute of limitations that's written into the Canada Elections Act, and to investigate all of those practices that occurred during the era of the sponsorship scandal following the '95 referendum. So we wouldn't want to get into that, Mr. Chairman, would we now? Because there were actual things that were genuinely illegitimate, genuinely illegal going on, and it was all the Liberal Party. It wasn't the Bloc, it wasn't the NDP, it wasn't the Conservatives or the predecessor parties to the Conservatives. It was the Liberal Party of Canada in there doing things that are by anybody's measure, and certainly by the measure of the courts, were illegal acts with regard to campaign funding. So they don't want to get that done. And I stress again, 21 Quebec ridings received envelopes of cash. We don't know which ones because when former Prime Minister Martin drafted the mandate of the Gomery Commission, he made sure that it only had a mandate to investigate certain aspects of the sponsorship program and not the parts that would have implicated the Liberal Party itself. The Auditor General had drawn attention to a range of different activities, and one of the chapters, I think it was Chapter 7 of her report, was specifically excluded from the mandate of the Gomery Commission. And so Mr. Justice Gomery could look into certain things and just had to halt his mandate at a certain point. And that's something, that's a can of worms, Mr. Chairman, the Liberals really and truly do not want opened again. Thus, the need to ensure it's 2006 and nothing else. Let's just keep that, we don't want a temporal context there. We don't want a multi-party context. We want decontextualized information. Actually, and we also don't want anything that involves those annoying little courts which actually have to base their findings on what the law actually says involved in this either. Because our goal here is thank you, Mr. President Justice, to embarrass somebody. It's not to actually find out what happened. It's simply to sift through that sock drawer, to dig through somebody's old love letters, to go through the contents of their garbage can, that sort of thing, and take that out of context and see what sticks. Just throw them out at the wall and see what sticks. That brings me to point number 4, Mr. Chairman, the 4 reasons the Liberals don't want to discuss their expenses along with ours, and they don't want to look, as the amendment to their motion suggests, at 2004 as well as 2006. And that is because it would remove their opportunity to set up a de facto double jeopardy here. Now, the concept of double jeopardy and the prohibition on double jeopardy in Canada is based on the idea, and all civilized countries, I might add, is based on the idea that you are taken out, and if an assertion is made that you've done something that's not lawful, or not within the bounds of the law, you're allowed, those who are prosecuting, you're allowed one shot at it. And there's, of course, as you know, there's a proceeding in court. I should mention, of course, the proceeding in court is the Conservative Party trying to get its money back, and not the reverse. But the Liberals realize there's a very good chance that what's going to happen is the courts are going to rule in our favor. Well, they don't want that to happen. I mean, it can't stop that from happening, thank goodness, or else we'd know about be debating a motion to stop the courts from looking at this, because this committee is so much better suited in the Liberals' minds to dealing with issues like this. But the courts are going to ultimately decide how the law ought to be interpreted. And that's what this really comes down to. How should the law be interpreted? And, laws get written sometimes in ways that allow for a variety of legitimate interpretations. Ultimately, the courts have to decide which of those interpretations is legitimate. But look, we on this committee interpreted the Elections Act, the part dealing with identification, differently from how the Chief Electoral Officer did when it came to the issue of veiled voting. I personally think that, with appropriate respect, that the Chief Electoral Officer's interpretation was incorrect, and that ours was correct. But I'm respectful of his interpretation. That is, I think it was given legitimately. We're just now dealing, and all of us anxious to pass legislation that will deal with the fact that the Chief Electoral Officer has come along and interpreted a law, actually the same law, with regard to the addresses of rural voters, or the absence of addresses which cite a civic address, a physical location. from driver's licenses and other pieces of ID. This is something where, you know, the law was passed without an awareness that this could arise as a problem, and not just from us, but from the experts. Mr. Mayron and his predecessor, Mr. Kingsley, appeared before us, and it hadn't occurred to them either. Yes, I see, Chairman. I see. I'm using this by way of analogy to point out that there can be multiple interpretations of the same law, and that it's legitimate to have differing interpretations. If there were no differing interpretations, if we all had the same interpretation of the law, there would be no need for courts. We could just have police, no court system. No need to adjudicate disputes, because it would always be clear, well, here's the law, you've broken it, or you haven't broken it, and we will deal with you accordingly, and that'd be the end of that. Of course, the odd time there actually is a state that gets run that way, and we know those as police states. And we don't do that here, Mr. Chairman. We have a court system. But the Liberals would like to set that aside, because there's a very strong risk.
I appreciate the fact that filibustering sometimes causes you to reach very deeply into your life experience or some obscure point to keep going, but I guess I'm having a hard time finding how this is relevant to the amendment before us.
But as chair, I'll make that interpretation. Appreciate it. And I'm interpreting that this is relevant. He does bring it back, and I asked him to bring it back to the amendment. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
I will just caution members, we are running a little out of time here, and I do need those lists of witnesses, so I will stop the meeting probably in about 10 to 12 minutes. Mr. Reid, please continue.
Well, Mr. Chair, actually, I appreciate Mrs. Redmond's observation. You yourself had noticed that I was getting a little too detailed in my analogy, and perhaps the point had been made without continuing on through multiple examples. But the point I was driving at was that there are different legitimate interpretations of the law. You notice I'm using the word legitimate now. Of course, this goes back to my concern about the word illegitimate. There are legitimate different interpretations of the law. So, you know, it makes it inappropriate to use the term illegitimate. And I'm bringing all this back to the point I was getting at, which is there are 4 reasons why the Liberals are objecting to the examination of both their expenses and ours in both 2004 and 2006. And I was on the 4th of those points, which is that there is a process for dealing with these things. And they want to have a discussion that essentially prejudges before the courts have a chance to judge. Now, in the end, the judgment of this committee, whatever it might happen to be, no matter whether it's in context or out of context, is going to be a preliminary finding. Ultimately, the courts would rule as to whether it's the Conservative Party is deserving of those rebates that it is seeking before the courts, or whether, in fact, the Conservative Party's interpretation was not the correct one. And when that happens, everything we've done here will all kind of fade away. But, Mr. Chairman, I think the concern the Liberals have is this. Well, there could be an election in between then and now, and they really could use a Conservative scandal. So this one just looks so juicy. The facts may not be on their sides, but we can set up a set of hearings in which only some of the facts get presented, in which people will be asked questions, and Mr. LeBlanc sort of hinted at this in his comments. We didn't hint, he said specifically, will be asked, were you pushed? Were people prodding you? Were they bullying you? Were they whatever? Well, you know, these are all questions that are subjective. They're not questions that are questions of law. They're not questions of, did somebody illegally force you to do something? Did they tell you to doctor your books, for example? Those would be breaches of the law. No, it's all this sort of soft stuff, but it'll make great TV. And with any luck, if we have an election between the time at which we have these hearings and the time at which the courts decide, bang, we're set. We've got what has the appearance of being a scandal. If later on the courts rule and turned out it wasn't a scandal, well, who cares? We did better in the polls because we left the false impression that somebody was engaged in activities which were wrong because we decontextualized the whole thing. That's the point, Mr. Chairman. That's their 4th point. And frankly, that's the most important one. They're hoping to engage in a court of star chamber. They're hoping to engage in a McCarthyite witch hunt. It is inappropriate, Mr. Chairman, and that's why we're seeking to amend this to make it more open and to ensure that a context is provided by looking at Liberal, financing practices in 2004 and conservative financing practices in 2004. The Liberals aren't interested because they think that Tom Flanagan has indicated that this particular financing method wasn't in use in 2004. But we're seeking to open this up. And if they go along with that, Bob's their uncle. We've got our hearings. But I think the hearings won't produce the make-believe scandal they think they can generate. And that's what I'm hoping to see change. For that reason, Mr. Chairman, I will be supporting the proposed amendment to the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Mr. Lemieux.
I'd just like to point out one of the reasons that this motion needs to be amended is because there's confusion within the Liberal Party. One of the first things that Monsieur LeBlanc said at the very beginning, quite categorically, was that this is not about limits. This is not about local limits. This is not about federal limits. He went on at quite some length, explaining to everybody that this was not about limits. Then Monsieur Gaudin, when he spoke, said this is about limits, actually. And then when Monsieur LeBlanc spoke again, a second time, he agreed it's about limits. So there's definitely confusion with the original motion, and I don't think it's in anybody's best interest to be so limiting and to have such confusion, especially in amongst the opposition ranks. Mr. Chair, one of the things that we have always said, we've said this in the House, we've said this outside the House, we're saying it again here in committee, is that our actions with respect to election financing are in accordance with the law, they're in accordance with the spirit of the law, they're in accordance with the letter of the law. And that's important. But one of the key things that we've also said is that it is in accordance with the practices of other parties. And this is a key point. We want to move ahead in a spirit of openness. Let's open the books. Yes, we'll open our books. Let's open the books of the other parties. And let's call witnesses to look at our books, the books of the other parties. In this case, I'm suggesting the Liberal Party. And let's move ahead for Canadians in a spirit of openness. But I want to pick up on a point that my colleague, Mr. Reid, had mentioned, which is why would the Liberals not be interested in moving ahead in this fashion? And one of the things that I've noticed, Mr. Chair, and actually I'm a new MP, it's somewhat shocking to me, but the Liberal Party is steeped in hypocrisy. I've seen this particularly in this last 2 weeks, actually, and I want to pick up on a couple of examples. The greeting card example, this came up in question period. The Liberals were very concerned that the Prime Minister had sent greeting cards to Canadians. And what we find out is that one of the Liberal MPs who's actually asking the question, who's leading the attack on this.
Mr. Chairman, I don't like to interrupt a colleague, but you indicated that we have a few minutes left. This filibuster is obviously designed to run the clock, and now they're talking about an unrelated issue with respect to greeting cards. So, Mr. Speaker, many holidays are approaching. We're all worried about greeting cards. Perhaps you could rule on whether greeting cards are relevant to allegations of election fraud made against the Conservative Party.
I'm going to ask. I'm going to rule on the point of order. I'm going to ask you to come back to the amendment. We're debating the amendment, so if we could just have your comments focused around the amendment.
Actually, he's trying to push the conversation into greeting cards. What I'm saying is that it has to do with hypocrisy. Why would the Liberals not support this amendment? This is where I'm going with this. And what I'm saying is that they will not support this amendment.
Point of order, Mr. Reid.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, unless I'm very much mistaken, neither the original motion nor the amendment to it speaks of election fraud, which is a very specific allegation. So I just want members to be aware of that. I think Mr. LeBlanc honestly misstated something, but I think it points to the danger of using hyperbolic rhetoric.
I think we all have an opportunity with debates. Certainly the chair wants to keep debates as wide as we can possibly keep them, and I know members are very passionate about various positions, but I would sort of ask members to be careful on their choice of words as we continue this debate. We do only have a few more minutes left, and I too hate to cut off members. We can continue this debate at another time. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. For now, Mr. Lemieux, please stay on focus with the amendment at hand. Thank you.
And what I'm discussing, Mr. Chair, is why is it that the Liberals would back away from an amendment that asked them to open their books? Because one of the points I made was that We have said in the House, we have said outside the House, and we've said here in committee that our election financing practices are in accordance with the practices of other parties. This is important, that they are in accordance with the practices of other parties. I then went on to ask the question, why is it that the Liberals would back away from an amendment like this? If they want to be open with Canadians, the Liberals should in fact open their books and say, yes, the Liberals have nothing to hide either. And one of the reasons I'm putting forward, Mr. Chair, is the reason of hypocrisy. And to show hypocrisy, I'm pointing out what happened in the House in the last 2 weeks alone. There was the greeting card attack by the Liberal Party, and the very Liberal member that was leading the attack in the House of Commons, she herself had sent out the same greeting cards to constituents. And then, if you remember, more hypocrisy.
Still on hypocrisy.
Still on hypocrisy, because this is why you'd be backing away from this amendment. On hypocrisy, then there was the software. Oh, the Conservatives use a software to track such things as when particular holidays take place. They led an attack on that, only to find out the Liberals use exactly the same software, and then all lines of questioning stopped. So as I said, the hypocrisy is somewhat breathtaking. And when it comes to this particular issue of election financing, I don't know if anyone else has noticed. I'm sure they have. I'm sure Canadians have noticed. The only party in the House pursuing this during question period is the Liberal Party. And I'm saying, if this is the case, if they really want to serve Canadians and they want to show, in fact, that their actions have been above board, then they should open their books as well. They should not be backing away from this amendment. What have they got to fear? And like I said, Mr. Chair, one of our key tenets is that what we have done is in accordance with the practices of other parties. And what that means is that other parties have done exactly the same thing. It is legal. It's in accordance with the letter of the law. It's in accordance with the spirit of the law. But the reason I think the Liberals are worried, why they might be scared, is because they have a huge crisis in credibility. And when I say a huge crisis in credibility, why would they have a crisis in credibility? Because of hypocrisy, which is what I just pointed out. And they've got their own problems with an MP such as Blair Wilson. So they've... Yep.
But again, I want to caution members about using these names of other members at this time. We can just keep our comments strictly focused to the amendment debate. That's what we're on, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. Lemieux, to just stay right on that debate.
That's good.
Please.
I take your point, Mr. Chair. I apologize for using his name. What I want to say, though, is that the Liberals, in fact, should be embracing this amendment. I think Canadians would embrace this amendment. If the Liberals have nothing to hide, then they should move forward. They should vote in favor of this amendment. Why not open the books in 2004 and 2006? And I think if we do proceed in that fashion, then, in fact, Mr. Chair, we will see that the actions of the Conservative Party in 2006 indeed are in accordance with actions taken by other parties in the 2006 election and in previous elections as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask colleagues, we have 6 or 7 minutes according to my clock left. I have 2 speakers on the list. I'm happy to keep this list and we can continue this debate on the Tuesday that we return after the break. It can be, here's the caveat. I am hearing that Bill C-55 is being referred to this committee. So I'm going to ask members in compliance with our original agreement that if that's here, we will proceed with that. If that's before this committee, we'll proceed with that. So I'm going to ask members to submit 2 witnesses lists so we can proceed in accordance to what's before us. Does that make sense? Madam Redmond.
I guess I'm just a bit curious. Don't we usually receive a bill in committee and then discuss it, and after that, I mean, I haven't seen the bill, and I'm sure there's a break week and there'll be lots of time, but generally speaking, we see it and have a look at it before we submit witness lists. That is my recollection of how that process usually unfolds.
Okay. I'm happy to go with that. Then we will get, sorry, Mr.
I believe
President.
that during routine proceedings this morning that bill was deemed presented to the committee? So.
No, it wasn't. No. We know that it's coming.
I've been in court before, but it was not this year.
To the chair, please. To the chair. My understanding from my clerks is that there's an indication the bill will be referred promptly to the committee. So in preparation of the fact that it will be here when we return, we can easily, as we have in the past, we've been very lenient about witness lists. So if you have any witnesses you want to provide, that's fine. I think we need to, at this stage, get witnesses lists in preparation for the continuation of this discussion. And can I ask colleagues to have those witnesses to our clerk by Monday, 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. for this issue?
You've got ours.
Monday is Monday the 5th, just to be absolutely certain. Monday the 5th of November is correct. We in agreement here on all sides by Monday 5 p.m. The bill, I'm just trying to anticipate business of the committee. I suspect the bill will come probably tomorrow, and we will not be meeting before tomorrow. If you see the bill, let's start thinking about witnesses list there as well, so the committee can be as efficient as possible. We are not anticipating, by the way, we're not anticipating a decision by the House. This is just a bill that I know is very likely coming. You have a point of order? All right, I'll go with Mr. Epp first on a point of order.
It's on the issue of C-55. I believe that the Speaker has ruled that that has been referred to the committee as a carryover from the previous Parliament.
At this moment in time, at 12:56, reading the blues, it's not clear that that is the order of the Speaker. I, as the chair of this committee, it's not clear to me that that direct order is made. My interpretation is it's coming, but unless I'm about to get a different clarification, so let's just pause on that for a minute, because maybe I'm getting the right answer to that question. Monsieur Proulx?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to understand our...
All right.
I just want to understand our procedure. Do we not normally receive such a project, such a bill from the House, look at it at this committee, and then decide if we need witnesses, if we want witnesses? Exactly. Yeah. May I continue, please?
Please, of course.
Do we not normally receive it? Do we not normally look at it and then, as a group, decide if witnesses are necessary, and if they are, then we can file our list of witnesses? To be very honest with you, we don't know what witnesses could be called because we don't know the exact sense or contents of that particular bill.
All right. My understanding is this bill was lost at prorogation, was reintroduced without any changes. My apologies if members haven't seen this bill already. I assumed members had seen the bill. If you haven't seen the bill...
Excuse me, was that ever in front of this committee?
I don't know that it was in front of this committee, but it's been introduced in the House. Well, that's fine. We will just do our best to get witness lists. Please, go ahead.
The bill that was brought back was in the very same form and format as the old C-55, which was before the committee before prorogation. It was already here. Had we begun to study it, Mr. Analyst? We had begun the study of it, and Minister Van Loan had appeared on the bill, and the committee heard his testimony on that bill. So the issue is to review it as a group and discuss what it is we want to do with it?
We need to look at it together so that we can decide what we're going to do with it. What if we decide when we get it that we accept it as is? We don't need witnesses, but if we decide not to, or if we decide we want explanations, then we can decide on what type and what witnesses we want. So what I'm saying to you is, I don't think we need at this time to decide on the witnesses without knowing what we want to do with the bill. So therefore, on Tuesday the 13th, we could deal with that to start with and then continue on this particular subject and get the witnesses later. If I very respectfully...
respectfully accepted. We have then the witness lists to be presented to the clerk on the matter that we were discussing today by Monday at 5 o'clock. Bill C-55, I'm not sure what the number will be when it comes in. We have seen it. We've started studying it. Please take your time to refresh your memories on the bill. And just so that the clerks are prepared and the committee doesn't waste too much time, if you have any witnesses, get them to us. Otherwise, we will discuss further witnesses on Tuesday, November 13th. Acceptable? Comment, Mr. Reid?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I understand correctly, you would not. I think what you just said to Mr. Prue is that it's okay to continue submitting witnesses afterwards. That we shouldn't have a time constraint on us vis-a-vis Bill C-50.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Is that understood?
I just want to understood. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to accept Mr. Prue's comments that the bill is probably not fresh in our memories, and we may want to have another look at it. I'm not sure that we need to look at it that long. You know, as the chair, I want to see the business of the committee get going here. It would seem to me that we could submit our witness lists by Monday at 5, but I see that probably won't pass, looking at the nods from the left side of the table. So I see that I'm in a position here to get concurrence or acceptance on having the witness list for the matter we discussed today by Monday at 5. But I do not see the agreement to submit the witness list for C-55, continuation of C-55, which we will begin on September 13th. I don't see the consensus for a witness list by that date. Is that the understanding of the chair? Is that correct? And is everybody clear on that then? Colleagues, please have a nice break and a busy time in your ridings. Madam Redmond.
Just a point of clarification. I understand that there was an agreement in the fact that you're balancing many issues right now, Mr. Chair, but that Mr. Epp and I are on the speaker's list.
Correct.
And we would continue that at the beginning
Confirmed.
of our next meeting.
That's correct. Mr. Epp will have the floor first, then Madam Redmond. We'll continue the debate at where we left off. And having said that, meeting adjourned.